Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Don't mind us. We've just been backstage trying to figure out how to pronounce Mike Strawn's name. And if you've been saying Strachan like me, then now you know it's Mike Strawn. But we'll get to that when the seventh round gets here. We're going to go over the Colts 2021 NFL draft picks. They had 7 picks, and then they signed 5 undrafted free agents. And you know us, we're draft nerds. We couldn't not give you this show today. So obviously, first up, Kwity Paye. You know, for everyone who had been listening to our podcast for the last several months, knew that Kwity Paye was probably best case scenario. In the week or two leading up to the draft, I was kind of starting to come to terms with the fact he wasn't going to be there. You know, you heard me. I said basically Kwity Paye or Christian Darrisaw was my ideal pick 'em at 21, and they were both there. And you got to go with the edge defender because, again, like we said, if you've got a potentially high-end edge defender, you got to go in that direction. I know you were a big fan of that move as well.
Yeah, it was weird. This was one of the very few times, maybe ever, watching the draft in my entire life. And I've been a big draft nerd since I was 10. It's been my favorite aspect of the NFL. This might be one of the few times where I'm just begging for a guy to slip to my team's pick. And then he got there and my team picked him. It was perfect. I mean, I said this on Twitter the other day, but I was on a Discord call with one of my buddies. He was watching the draft. I don't like watching the first round. I think it's terribly boring. It's just not very fun for me watching the first round. So I usually am doing something else, and I'll just follow with the people who tip the picks or whatever on Twitter. But my buddy was kind of reading the picks off to me as we were just chatting on Discord. And he told me the Giants were up, and I was like, okay, they're going to take Paye here. I was completely convinced that the Giants were going to take him. And then when he told me Tony was the pick, I was like, holy crap, we got Kwity Paye. Right. I didn't even think of them the possibility of them passing on him for someone else. I was like, holy crap. We actually got Kwity Paye. It was awesome. Kwity Paye honestly is not this complete product yet. I watched I think 4 of his games from this past year. Well, I know he played 4, so I watched all 4 of his games from this past year. In every game he played in 2019 for my film review that I did for Stampede Blue this past week. And, he's not a finished product, so I wouldn't expect, 10 sacks as a rookie or anything like that. But he's so disruptive, just so disruptive. I mean, great power. I think he did 36 reps on the bench, which is insane for a guy who's 260. That's absurd. That's what you see out of offensive linemen who are 320. I think Quentin Nelson and Braden Smith did around that. Yeah. So you get that strength, you get his athleticism. I mean, his reported 6'3", 3 cone, which is just otherworldly. It's hard to even. Or I think it was 6'5", 7, maybe. I don't know. Either way, if you're under if you're under 7 at all in a 3 cone, it's elite. If you're under 6'8", that's absurd. That's Von Miller range, and that's kind of what we were getting with Kwity Paye in that video. That it wasn't official, but it looked pretty darn good. So you get all the athletic traits and all the ability, and you have a disruptor. And that's the biggest thing the Colts missed last year. You had Justin Houston and Danico Autry who got sacks, but they weren't really disrupting anything. They would have 1 or 2 good rushes a game, or they would clean up what DeForest Buckner was creating in the middle. Now with a guy like Kwity Paye, the sacks might be down, but the amount of disruption and pressures you're going to get off the edge with him is just so much. It's just going to be so much better for the defense overall. So I love this pick for right now, and I also love this pick for the next couple of years. I really do think Kwity Paye can be one of the best pass rushers in football from everything that I saw on film. Especially when you also account that he has got this high character, high work ethic, good run defender. I mean, I just think this is a home run pick at 21. I don't know how he was there at 21. Honestly, in my opinion, I thought he was a top 10 player in this draft. So to get him at 21 is just outstanding value. I mean, just a great selection by Ballard, and we got super lucky that he lasted that long.
Yeah, so I think the Giants were at about 12th before they traded back, and we thought Paye might go then. So for him to not be picked up by them at 20 was pretty surprising. I think my favorite reaction to that was I saw someone tweet, Kadarius Toney in this economy. I don't know why, but that was just so funny.
I mean, as someone who wasn't super high on Tony, I do kind of get that. Because, like, honestly, to me, Tony at 20, when you could get, like, Elijah Moore beginning of the second round or
Yeah.
Rondell Moore in the second round, like, yeah, I
He
mean,
isn't. Yeah, he isn't leaps and bounds above those guys by any means, and has a similar skill set.
yeah, I personally would have taken Kwity Paye if I were them, but whatever. We got him,
Yeah,
so it doesn't matter.
exactly. Yeah, and on with the next pick, you obviously saw that the Colts were plenty happy when they heard that it was Tony that went at 20.
That's hilarious, honestly. I've seen other fan bases kind of mocking the Giants because of that. But that is kind of hilarious, like finding out who another team took and just everyone just excited and stuff like that instead of being like, oh, damn, they took our player. It's just everyone like celebrating that they took a different one.
I saw that last year with the Vikings draft room, or they were all at home, whatever. But the Vikings decision makers, when the Eagles took Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, they were like, oh, hell yes.
Yep.
All right, but yeah, moving along to the Colts' next pick in the second round, number 54 overall, they threw us the first curveball, and they took Vanderbilt edge Dayo Odeyingbo. And at first, I think a lot of people had to say who first because he wasn't because of the injury, he just wasn't really slated to go right there. But yeah, for them to go back to back edge, that first the pick kind of took me back. And then the more I digested it, the more I liked it. The Achilles obviously is an issue. And first and foremost, he has to come back from that. It's not like a foregone conclusion that he's going to be perfectly fine when he does.
Yeah.
But, their thought is they're getting him back at 100% at some point. So from their perspective, they're getting a versatile guy who potentially could be a souped-up version of Danico Autry.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh, you can get him in the fourth round. You could have got him in the fifth round," or because it's mock simulator like mania is kind of what causes that. Pro Football Network and all them had him as like a fourth or fifth round guy, so everyone thinks that's where you can get him in mocks. But I put it in my film article I did on him the other day. But the Chiefs were dead set on taking him at the end of the second round if he got there. They were definitely going to take him. Ballard actually used his Chiefs connections to know that. That's who they were going to take. So that's what made him more sure about the pick. But also the Panthers, who picked 2 spots ahead of the Colts, actually had his name on the card and were going to turn it in until Washington called with the trade up for Cosme. So there were 2 teams that were really interested in him in that second round. So you weren't going to get him in the fourth or fifth round like everyone wants to say. But Dayo's a really good player on film, a player who I liked when I watched on film, but I kind of put him off because of that Achilles injury. Like, I don't even know if he was in my top 200 big board because I just was like, whatever, Achilles injury, I'm just going to prioritize other players, like obviously an oversight by me and probably by a lot of people who did their rankings and big boards and stuff.
I hadn't watched him.
Yeah. And honestly, his film is good. We talk about Kwity Paye being raw. Well, Dayo's a lot more raw than that. But his traits, like, if you're just going trait-based analysis, he's got the super long arms, great size, great natural strength, like pretty elite explosion. I mean, there's a lot of plays where I've slowed it down and I've taken screenshots of him being the first guy off the line.
His first step is for real.
Yeah, his first step is insane for a guy of his size, because we're not talking about a guy who's like 250, 260. He was 280, like 285, I think is what he played at. So when you're looking at just the traits with him, along with the energy, the hustle, and then when he does hit on a pass rush move, how good it does look, I see the potential the Colts saw. That Achilles injury is very concerning. And I've seen a lot of people say, like, oh, Kevin Durant recovered from his perfectly fine at 31 years old. Well, the Achilles injury it's a pretty major injury, and everyone recovers from it differently. Some guys can be like Kevin Durant and come back from it and be perfectly fine. But other guys can be 20, 21 and not recover at the same level or be back to what they were. So, I think with that risk, I'm still a little nervous about this pick going forward, especially with, the recent history that the Colts have with injuries and also with developing edge rushers. It's not great in either of those regards. But I think when you look at the pure traits that you saw on film with Dayo, I think it warrants a second round pick. And like Ballard said, kind of in that with the next pick, he was originally thinking that the 21st pick when they first started watching his film until obviously the Achilles injury. So They really, really like him. I think he's the perfect replacement for Danico Autry, a guy who rushes really well on the interior, but can also have some juice off the edge. And yeah, he fits this defense really well. You could tell that he's definitely like an Eberflus type of defensive lineman because he just does so much that this defense needs from that position.
Yeah, I really hope he can come back healthy because in 2022, after he is, another year removed from that injury and him and Pay are another year developed, that
Mm-hmm.
pass rush could be a problem, especially that's not even taking into account Buckner inside.
Yeah,
Like that
Buckner.
defensive line could
Yeah,
be stupid good in 2022.
yeah.
So that's really exciting. The Colts did not have a third round pick. They sent that to Philly in exchange for Carson Wentz as part of that deal. The fourth round pick was another overlooked pick that you really liked again. SMU tight end Kylan Granson. And this guy looks dangerous. This wasn't the strongest tight end class ever, but
Mm-hmm.
he really looks like that next line of day 3 tight ends that can come in and be a star.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he finished as my tight end 7 in this class, and it would have technically been tight end 6, but Jacob Harris was a receiver / tight end that I had right ahead of him. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, Kylan Granson, man, I don't know why he was so overlooked throughout this process. Like, yeah, he's a little smaller, and he's not a great blocker. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He needs a lot of work as a blocker, but in what we have now in this league of like move tight ends and guys who have to catch the ball, I just think he's a perfect fit in the league. I mean, he's a great route runner. He knows how to, use his feet along with his body and his positioning to get open, which I think is a very underrated aspect of being a receiver, being a pass catcher. He's got pretty good hands. I mean, obviously he had some drop issues just in the box score stuff, but I think a lot of that was that Cincinnati game. I
Yeah.
watched that game. He didn't look right. I don't know if it was mentally or physically. It was just a really, really weird game for him. But I think like that was like a fourth of his career drops came in that one game.
Yeah, I looked at Pro Football Focus to get some context on that because they chart drops.
Mm-hmm.
And so that season, because he said when we talked to him after he got drafted in the media session that it all came from one game. So I wanted to check that out. It was 4 drops in one game, and it was like mid to late in the season. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't have any. He had 0 leading up to that game, and then he only had 1 after that.
Okay.
And then he had like 11 drops in his career. And
Okay. So like half of his drops.
that 4 drops was like close to half of his career drops. So it isn't an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I just really enjoy his film. I think, if you're going to a different type of team or a different coach, maybe I wouldn't be as high on him. But the fit with Frank Reich is so good. Because if you look at a lot of the things that Trey Burton was asked to do as a pass catcher for the Colts last year, which wasn't a ton, but it was a lot of those deep out routes, those intermediate in routes and such. I think Pro Football Focus put a stat out about Kylan Granson's effectiveness as an intermediate catcher. Pass catcher this past year. I think it was like the highest graded tight end in the class in the intermediate game, or maybe the second highest behind Pitts. And I think that's where Reich likes to use his tight ends and what he's really seeing in Kylan Granson. So I just love his fitness offense. I think he's just going to open a lot more things up. And even if he's only getting, 20 to 25% of the snaps, I think he's going to be effective in that role. So the way that I've kind of compared him is like more like a higher end, more souped up kind of Trey Burton. You're going to get that similar type of mold of player, but I think you can have a lot more potential. And then also you get 4 years of a very cheap contract and a young player who can get better. So, yeah, fourth round value for him. I think that was just a great pick. I think that's where I had him ranked too, as a fourth round type of prospect. So I was pretty high on him compared to most people.
Yeah, there's a couple things I especially like about his situation with the Colts. One thing is it looks like they'll be able to have a tight end that can attack the seam, which can be really dangerous.
Yep.
And I can see Carson Wentz liking that. If he's got a guy that he sees, 25 yards downfield, go ahead and rip it. So I think that's a possibility. And I also they're not drafting him to have to be the starter right away. And he's a smart kid as is, and he understands why tight ends take a little while to acclimate. So I think he's going to have an easier time adjusting because I think they will use him as that move tight end more so because, Jack Doyle and Mo Alley-Cox, they're going to have them just block the hell out of things. So they don't need him to be that blocker. They can have him add that to his game later, they'll probably get him on the field to be a mismatch. And so I think he'll be able to be useful pretty quickly. And they do use 2 and 3 tight ends. So I like that he should be able to contribute quickly. And then maybe by 2022, he's got a more significant role. So I really like that.
Yeah, the biggest thing with him is just going to be getting that blocking up to an average level. I think it's below average right now. And if you can get it up to an average level, you can get teams out of their base defense when you have 2 tight ends on the field with him. And that's just another way you can mismatch against defenses and such. So teams need to be able to fear the run when he's on the field. And currently, I don't think that's what's going to happen. But his ability as a pass catcher, I think, is great. And it adds something where, 2018 was a big thing that we saw with Eric Ebron, the way that the Colts were able to split him out and utilize, switch releases, stacked looks, stuff like that, to really create openings in the pass game because you have this tight end who is a mismatch. I think Granson kind of brings a lot of that. And if you actually watch the SMU film, you see so many aspects that are very Colts-like. You see a lot of deep outs and deep ins or whatever, with their tight ends, but you also see those switch releases, those stack sets, those bunches that the Colts love to use with Eric Ebron back in 2018. So I just think he's a great fit for everything that Reich likes to use with his move tight end. I love the fit. I think he's going to be a productive player for years.
And something else I think I know you'll like is that that kind of takes Zach Ertz out of things now. So no trade cap, no trade capital, and they don't have to spend much money if the Eagles release him. Yeah. I'd have to imagine that puts a fork in any more tight end talk for the Colts. So
it should, yeah, it really should. There's no room for it. You got 3 that are locks to make it at this point, so you shouldn't. Maybe if you bring in another low end type of guy or like high potential guy, but you already have that in Noah Togiai or whatever. So I don't know. I don't see the point of bringing another tight end.
Exactly. Now this 5th round pick, it's kind of grown on me more since seeing how the Colts talked about it on with the next pick. But in the 5th round at 165, they took Florida safety Sean Davis. Now he's one of those guys that keeps things in front of him, and he hits like a son of a bitch. Like,
oh, he does.
That's his dominant trait is toughness and basically hit power. But he does have closing speed. He can keep those things in front of him. I saw you mentioned he's probably going to more so be special teams because I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that he has that big toolbox to be the 3rd safety. Like he could probably do some things they want him to do in certain sub packages, but he's not. It just doesn't seem like he's going to be that guy that they have utilized before to wear a lot of different hats. I think he does a couple things really well, and that's fine for that to be his role.
Yeah,
and honestly, I think special teams sounds really good for that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that they would want out of their 3rd safety is just reliability. And maybe the other Sean Davis is more equipped for that currently. But I think this pick, this Sean Davis now, we have 2 on the roster, which is going to be it's going to be hellish this year.
At least they're spelled different.
Yeah, imagine if they're spelled like the Jets taking both Michael Carters. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was so cool. I was laughing so hard at that. But Sean Davis was an interesting. I think he's my least favorite pick of the class for the Colts. But he is a guy where I understand the process with the pick. You have a guy who has really good range, even if he doesn't know how to use it sometimes, has really good range. He's willing to be physical. He's willing to come up in the run game. There's a lot of things that have to be worked out with him, but he does have that high-end potential. And if you're going to take a guy in the 5th round, I completely understand taking a shot on this type of guy. But like I said with special teams, I really don't see him being in any kind of real role this year. I would just personally be terrified of it. Again, his range was fine on film, and he has good ball skills, but his tackling is really, really bad right now. Like every game I watched, it was 2 to 3 missed tackles or bad angles, which you can't have that as an NFL safety. I mean, we saw that a little bit with Malik Hooker the last couple of years, and that's why he's no longer on our team and no longer on any team right now. He'll get picked up by someone, but you have to be reliable as a safety in the NFL, and right now he's not that. And also just with his tackling, I think yes, he's a big hitter, but it's kind of like that Bernard Pollard type where he's a reckless big hitter.
Yeah.
Where he drops his head. I mean, he leads with his head on a lot of these big hits, and it actually got him thrown out of the first game of the year this past year. His 2020 was actually kind of rough. I think this 2020 he got kicked out of the first game of the year with a targeting call. And then he had some injuries, and then he also was on the COVID list for a bit. So he had a very, very inconsistent 2020. But, I mean, if you look at his potential from 2019, because he had a really good 2019 season, you look at his traits that he has with his athleticism, I completely understand the process of this pick. It's just currently I think he needs a lot of work. He's probably more of a special teamer. And it's probably still my least favorite pick in the class. But I do think that he can be something someday.
Yeah, and I think as I ruin everything in the background, don't worry.
Dude, it looked like your whole house was falling down.
No,
I didn't know if it was just the picture or just, you got hit by a tornado.
My chair is so close to my wall. So no, I'll deal with this later. Another good trait that he has is he has natural ball skills, which is good. Like a lot of guys, a lot of defensive backs just seem like they're fighting the ball when they try to get to it, but he just has a natural knack to get to it. So that's good. But yeah, I don't hate the pick, but I would say that was probably my least favorite as well. It just seemed unnecessary right there. Next up is a very interesting one, and
my favorite one.
It's one that pisses off a lot of the fan base, although it really shouldn't. But Texas quarterback Sam Ehlinger in the 6th round with this 218th pick. I've said all offseason that I thought the backup quarterback was just going to come in the form of a veteran free agent. Like you get a Colt McCoy and Alex Smith, someone like that, just for some security behind Carson Wentz, because Jacob Eason, he's not their backup yet. They haven't evaluated him in that capacity. They can in training camp. He can win that in training camp if they like what they see. But they kind of got the next best thing, and that's a very experienced college player. Like 40 starts under his belt. He's seen a lot at Texas. So I think that was a strong move. I think Josh and I talked about this the other night on the Horseshoe Huddles podcast. But in an emergency situation, let's say they have all 3 of those guys on the roster, Wentz goes down, and they have to figure out what to do the next week, I think they'd be able to play Sam Ehlinger in a pinch before they would be able to play Eason, because they can mix in so much of the run with Ehlinger. Even if he had to run 20 times and it was an ugly, ugly game, I feel like they could make it work better than just tossing Eason out there. I think Eason has more upside. I will say that, but he I don't know. He's just still more of a project. I just think it's going to take more to get him on the field. But yeah, how they've talked about him too is much more glowing than they've ever talked about Eason. They've tried to keep everyone grounded when talking about Eason, but I think it was either Frank or Chris said, whatever it is, Sam has it.
Yeah.
And they didn't say that about Eason.
Nope. I love this pick. I had so much fun with this pick. I had a blast with it. Honestly, again, I like Jacob Eason. I think he has potential, and taking him in the 4th round made some sense last year. But the way the fan base got with it, with that pick, saying that he's the best quarterback on the roster and still saying he's the best quarterback on this roster, it was a bit annoying. So I'm really happy they took a quarterback, basically saying Wentz is our guy, but our backup quarterback position, it could be the 6th round guy. It could be Eason. We don't even know if Eason's good enough to beat out Sam Ehlinger. So I love it. I love the pick. Honestly, when it comes to Ehlinger, there's a lot that he can't do. He doesn't have a strong arm. He's not that naturally accurate. And those are 2 pretty big things when it comes to being a quarterback. But one thing that is really interesting to me is you see it all the time, especially with quarterbacks who are, I don't want to say injury prone, but do get injured more often than others, like a guy like Carson Wentz, who's had a couple injuries in his career, is you typically want a backup who's kind of in that similar mold, so you don't have to change your offense too much. Right. So Carson Wentz, he's this mobile, big quarterback who can run. You can work the RPO game with him a little bit. You can attack the short to intermediate. That's kind of what they want to do with Carson Wentz. That kind of describes Sam Ehlinger more than it does Jacob Eason. And Ehlinger, like you said, he has an it factor. He's a cerebral quarterback, where Jacob Eason's more of like a raw prospect with a great arm. We don't really know where the mental side of the game is with him, and it's never really been something that's been like raved about with him, even by the Colts or by his coaches at Washington or Georgia. Not saying that he's doesn't have that mental side whatsoever. I don't know the situation there, but Ellinger is a guy who kind of fits more of a career backup type and a career backup to Carson Wentz type than Jacob Eason does. So honestly, I think it's hard to say because again, I think Eason just was a better prospect and has more potential. But I think if you are looking at a backup, so to speak, for Carson Wentz, I do think it's probably more likely to be Ellinger than it is to be Jacob Eason.
Yeah, I just look at this situation this way. Kind of like I said, you could see Eason as someone who they could flip in a trade if he had a good preseason or training camp or something. And then Ellinger just makes so much sense as a backup. They could go to him quicker than they could Eason in a pinch.
Yeah.
Again, Eason has that upside and could entice another team to want to come get him if they decide to move on from him. But yeah, it's an interesting quarterback situation nonetheless, especially when Jalen Morton comes in and blows the doors off and makes everything so much more complicated.
Dude, how fun would it be of the two strong arm raw quarterbacks we have? Like Eason has a horrible preseason and Morton's just like throwing it 80 yards and like looking like a superstar.
I've seen this fan base get in a tizzy over training camp and preseason quarterbacks before.
Kelly.
I promise you it will be a thing. There's been Chad Kelly, Stephen Morris. I think there was a Brad Kaya Hive at some point. There's Philip Walker, obviously. This fan base loves their reserve quarterbacks, especially if they do well in the preseason. So
it's not just this one, though. It's all of them. It's all of them.
All the time, yeah.
Honestly,
it's so weird for some guys to have such – for some of these quarterbacks to have such strong followings for never having – we haven't even seen them in training camp.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I was covering Washington, Washington had arguably like the best like preseason quarterback roster because they had RG3 who was fine or whatever. And then you go to Kirk Cousins, who was a guy who should be a starter. So he was tearing up second team guys. And then you had Colt McCoy, who should have been a backup, tearing up the third team guys. So, I mean, they were killing everybody in the preseason. Everybody loved Colt McCoy, Kirk Cousins. So, yeah, it's just how it is. Everyone loves their preseason quarterback. But, yeah, I'm not excited for, like, one, I would love the East stands to all flip over to
Ellinger.
No, to the Morton, to Jalen Morton. Yeah. That would be fun. But we'll have to see. We'll see who wins everyone's heart. It's only 2 preseason games now, I think, right?
3.
3, okay.
They had to take 1 preseason game to add 1 regular season. Because I guess the CBA doesn't allow for any more than 20 games before the postseason or something. Gotcha. But yeah, before we move on from Ellinger, we obviously have to acknowledge the just awful tragedy that happened to his family. His brother Jake was actually found dead in they both went to the University of Texas. His brother Jake was found passed away this week. So I haven't heard any details about, like, I'm sure he didn't come to rookie camp. I can't imagine he did.
No, he went back. He went back home.
Right, yeah, and how long he's going to be away. But yeah, that's a situation where you just got to take as much time as possible because that's awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously football comes secondary to that. That him and his family have got to kind of wrap their minds around that situation. But on to a not so somber note. Arguably one of the most interesting picks the Colts made with the most upside. Mike Strawn, the wide receiver from Charleston, is about 6'5", 225, 85-inch wingspan. From, again, tiny Charleston in West Virginia. It seems like there's a guy like that every year. You've got like some enormous receiver or tight end from like the D2, D3 ranks, and they're just so raw and they just don't really end up making it. But Strawn actually did dominate his level of competition, and that's one of the honestly, that is probably the first thing you look for in these small school guys. Yeah. Did they even do well against the mathletes that they were playing against, and he did. I don't know what they think his timeline is. kind of sounds like they don't expect him to be an immediate contributor. They probably hope they can get him through on the practice squad for the year and then see what things look like the following season. But yeah, this dude, big, huge catch radius. He's got speed. I guess he ran like a 4.5 or something and was disappointed in that time because at the pro day, they made him like do the bench first.
Yeah.
And he put up like 20 reps on it. But yeah, I don't know why they would have someone exert all that energy in the bench press and then have them run probably the most important drill that people look at. So he's maybe got sub 4.5 speed. So yeah, that's
Colts had him at 4.46.
Okay. Wow. So yeah, whatever way you cut it, he's sub 4.5. So yeah, that's a ton of potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I had Charleston tape so I could actually break it down. But from what I've seen, he looks like if you're like playing out in like the street or whatever with your buddies, like in middle school, and then one of the dads comes out and plays or whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of what his highlight film looks like. It just looks like like a senior in high school playing with middle schoolers. Like
it's true, man. Funny story here. So in my old neighborhood, one of my old neighborhoods growing up, we had this new kid who came into town, and we all loved to play like backyard football and everything, like all the time. And this new kid moved into the neighborhood, just bigger, taller, faster, more athletic than all of us. I was always quarterback, so I picked him for my team to be a receiver. Later on a few years, he goes on to start at the high school, and then he goes on to play at Purdue.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, him and I bump into each other at NFL stuff every now and then. I think I bumped into the combine, and then he was scouting for, I think, a CFL team. I saw him at Colts camp like a year before that. So he's stuck around, but that's how it was. He was just mossing everybody. Like
that's basically what Strawn does.
Yeah, someone so clearly above everybody else athletically. And yeah, that's Strawn. So
yeah,
you like to at least see that. Again, I have no idea what it's going to look like against NFL defensive talent. So I like his chances of making some noise at least. There's always a lower level receiver in Colts camp every year that does something. So maybe that's it. And rounding out the draft class, this was a terrific pick. This was a layup if there ever was one in the 7th round. Will Fries, the offensive lineman from Penn State, like 40 plus starts in his time. Started at 4 of the 5 positions. The Colts love versatility. They have him listed as a guard primarily. But yeah, there's really nothing not to like about this. Nothing not to like about this pick.
Yeah,
I trip over my words every show.
No, I love this pick, man. This is like definitely one of my favorites of the class because he was a guy who I graded as the 4th round guy. I would have taken him. I would have taken him early day 3.
That's what I had been hearing from people who really know what they're looking at. An offensive lineman, they thought 4th, 5th round for him.
Yeah, and the thing is, he has shorter arms, and on film he's not this great athlete. So I get why he fell to the 7th, but super experienced, very technical. Had some good games against top competition. Kwity Paye, Chase Young. He had a couple good snaps against in 2019. Chauncey Golston from Iowa had a couple good games against him too. So just an experienced guy who's very battle tested, very smart, very technically savvy, can play any of the positions. I mean, that is a perfect pick if you want a utility lineman later in the draft. So I think he's a guy who can be a backup guard, be a backup tackle, kind of be any of those things in a pinch for you and just be very, very solid. So I love that pick. And I don't know how many people listening are like big on like TikTok and stuff like that, but apparently his girlfriend or his sister or someone, I don't know who it was recording his whole like draft process from day 2 all the way to the end. And you could just see him getting like more anxious throughout the whole, it was like a 2-minute video, more upset and more anxious throughout all of it. And then when he finally got that Colts call, it was really cool. So I definitely would say go look at it. I think I saw it on Colts Reddit. That's where they posted it. But really cool story with that guy. I'm glad he's here in Indy, and I think he's going to be a guy who sticks. I mean, it's just that what you need out of utility linemen, he brings all of that. So I think he's definitely going to stick, and I think he can play in a pinch.
Yeah, there's just something about the Colts and 7th round picks.
Yeah.
Like 7th round picks are almost tossaways for some teams. They're just guys, let's take a chance on this guy finally. But, Zaire Franklin, Matthew Adams, Jordan, no, those are 6th-round picks,
Yeah.
Jordan Glasgow. But it seems like at least every couple years there's a 7th-rounder that they just find their way onto the roster. And I could easily see Fries making the roster.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Colts then finally, quicker than normal. I feel like it normally takes them like a week or so to announce their undrafted free agents. They got 5 of them, a couple receivers, Tariq Black from Texas and previously Michigan, as well as Tyler Vaughns from USC. Also a pair of linebackers. They didn't draft one, so they had to get at least one in free agency. Liberty linebacker Anthony Butler and Isaiah Kafusi from BYU. And yes, he is in the lineage of all those other Kafusis that you've heard of from BYU. I think I read something. He's part of like a dozen or like 14 Kafusi family members from BYU, and some of them have made the NFL. So yeah, his family has been there and done that. And then one of the more intriguing ones, Duke running back Deion Jackson. He can run, catch, and return the ball. So that's an intriguing one. You and I were kind of talking off air first about which ones you thought might have the best chance at the roster. What are you thinking there?
Yeah, so I think if you just look at position-wise, I think Anthony Butler or Kafusi make the most sense for making it. I would lean towards Anthony Butler just because I really liked what I saw on film with him. I think he can play Sam. I think he can also play some Will. I like the way he plays. He's very tenacious, like downhill thumper type guy. So yeah, I think he has probably the best chance if you take into effect that they only really have to beat out Matthew Adams, who is a good player, but if you're looking at it from like the Colts perspective, you can get a younger version of Matthew Adams. You would take that, So I think that makes the most sense. But the Deion Jackson one's the one that intrigues me the most because he got the most guarantees of any undrafted free agent that Chris Ballard's ever signed. I believe it was $45,000 at signing, which is a pretty big deal for an undrafted free agent. I think, for comparison's sake, I think Anthony Butler got $8,000 at his, so $45,000 is quite a bit.
Yeah.
And he also has a really fun skill set. I think he was a 4.3s athlete at his pro day, but he was also like 225, I think. And he's also has kick return experience.
He's a big dude.
Yeah, and he's not just a kick returner either. He's a core 4 type guy. He can run down on kicks as well and play that just like Jordan Wilkins has done. So if the Colts do want to move on from Jordan Wilkins or if one of those 4 guys gets hurt, I definitely see him making the roster. So those two would be my main ones. The receivers are interesting, but I just think that receiver group that the Colts have right now is just so deep. We're bringing back all 6 guys who made the roster last year, along with having a 7th-round rookie and then a couple other veterans who have been around for a while. So I don't see an undrafted free agent really being able to crack that.
Yeah, I think with there only being 5 guys, it kind of sends out the message that, okay, we only brought in 5. We like the guys we already have on the roster, but these 5 guys, we really like them. We probably would have drafted them in the 7th round maybe, and they stand a good chance of competing. They're not going to unless some of these guys just don't make much progress, they're probably not going to bury them on like the 3rd and 4th team stuff in training camp. But I initially thought the linebackers made a lot of sense as well. Like you said, the Sam position is up for grabs, and those guys can play special teams. I know Kafusi has a special teams background. Matthew Adams and Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, those are kind of your competitors for Sam, and none of those is like super inspiring. You can't not move on from any. Zaire Franklin's a team captain though, so that might he mostly plays Will and Mike when he backs things up though. But yeah, there's not a huge competition there. I really like Tyler Vaughns from USC. He's one of those peripheral guys I talk about all the time where I notice him when I'm watching other prospects. When I watched Pittman, when you watch, Vera Tucker, guys like that. Tyler Vaughns is someone that catches my eye.
Yeah, back in 2018 when I was watching, I want to say it was Ronald Jones or Deontay Burnett or one of those guys. I remember there's an old tweet that I tweeted out apparently of Tyler Vaughns being like, "Oh, this sophomore kid's pretty good." So
and he's been productive since the first year he's seen playing time. I think he had like 50 catches his first year, and he's been productive every single year. I think is he a 200 catch guy?
I think so. But
Yeah.
when I saw his testing numbers, I was hoping that he had an injury-plagued college career.
Right. Yeah. But no, he's not special athletically, but he runs routes and he gets open and he's got reliable hands. He's got, as a receiver, he's got kind of the Zach Pascal stuff, but Pascal's thicker and more physical.
More athletic.
Yeah.
Pascal ran a 4.4, man.
I guess that's true. I just never looked at him as like
athletic,
but he does the little things, right?
Yeah, I think Pascal's RAS was like 7.8, I think, or something.
That's respectable.
So pretty good, pretty solid. Yeah.
Tariq Black is maybe the biggest name on there, or at least the name with the most potential that's been talked about for a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't think his timeline matches up with the Colts. I guess he could make the practice squad, but I don't see it being on the roster.
Yeah, I could see him and Strong being like the practice squad receivers this year.
Yeah, he's got great size. He's uber athletic. That's his calling card, but it's never come together in a complete package, either at Michigan or Texas. Yeah. And he's following his quarterback to the Colts and Sam Ehlinger, so maybe that helps things. Maybe that helps him acclimate and not have some huge learning curve early in training camp and things like that, because they're likely to be paired up together at times. So yeah, it's a big name, but it's honestly maybe the one that is least likely to make the roster.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. So we had to bring that draft wrap up to you guys. Of course, always you can interact with us on Twitter. Our handles are right there on the name tag. So that is it for today. Not going to give you the big long spiel on the whole outro, but yeah, that is it for today. Thank you guys for joining us.